Hi everyone. May I get your attention? Hello. Welcome to my talk. This is the last talk of today. I know that you may be tired. And thank you for attending. I see that almost all the chairs are filled up. And that means I have a very hard time right now because I need to tell a lot of stuff to you and you need to be convinced to use it. And I know that it was a difficult decision actually to make right now to go to that room or this room, or maybe that room is full already and they don't let you in and you have to come here. I don't know. Hopefully it's not. But thank you for attending. I'm very glad to see you all. And I'm glad to be here and share my knowledge about this topic, architecture, especially about the Flutter architecture, and see how it goes. So let me ask you a few questions. How many of you has already started a Flutter project, let's say, and once you started, you thought a lot about architecture first, but you didn't find a good example, or you didn't know how to do it at all? Okay, same. Damn it. Good. Or how many of you want to start and you want to actually architect your application right now and you still don't know what to do? Okay. So here I am. Today, I'm going to talk about a few concepts and methodology and some suggestions based on my personal experience and what I have implemented. And you will see what I've done. You will see maybe I've created this instead of this. And hopefully that helps you, this experience helps you to also create something clean that can be scalable and maintainable. So, in fact, many of us, when we want to start a software or an application, we had this in our mind. But okay, after a few months, we will get this. That's very common in software development, isn't it? But okay, it's fine. But there are some ways, actually, maybe to improve this. So, one way to fix this issue is to share the experience. Well, in fact, means use others' experiences in our application when we are architecting, right? And some of those experiences, we call them best practices, right? And when we combine them and add a little bit logic to it, then we will get patterns. You may be familiar with different patterns and best practices, right? And when we have these patterns and best practices combined all together and add a little bit of philosophy to it, and then you will end up having methodology. And actually, domain-driven design is one of those methodology. So all the content today, especially the first part of the talk, which is Introduction to Domain-Driven Design, is based on, well, of course, this book, the main book of domain-driven design, which is out for a long time, and these other books. So I put in my slides for your reference later if you want to get them and read more. And for your information, each of these 3 books have almost 800 pages. So you feel like I cannot compact them in one 45-minute talk, right? But we will go through those concepts that I personally think they help me to architect my application, and it's a fantastic idea to do it. So you see that I am suggesting the way that I have done it, right? So let me introduce my talk first. Today, The first part is we're going to go through the introduction to DDD. How many of you know DDD? Almost everyone, right? But how many of you has used DDD to architect an application? Good. So the rest of you are in the right place. So we go through the strategic part of domain-driven design. In fact, domain-driven design has two design tools. We will go through the strategic part of it. So I would say that most of the talk today is a theory and a strategy of how to architect. I show you some codes and the way that I did with some samples of architecture, but most of the talks are around the theory behind that. And then, of course, sample codes and what I've done, and my suggestion for architecting the Flutter application, and then lastly, a demo. But before that, let me introduce myself. My name is Majid. I'm based in Oslo, Norway. I'm a passionate software developer, just like all of you here, same as you. And in my spare time, I do a lot of community stuff. I wrote a book, and I'm quite actually active in community. You can find me also on social media, especially on Twitter, with this handler. I'm happy to help you if you have any question later. You can just ping me a message. So let's get started. Domain-driven design. We as a software developer, when we start, of course, we think about software, right? But this is the thing that domain-driven design tells us. Don't think about software. Business is more important. We are here to serve business. We want to build something that works for business. Even though if your company is doing a software as a main business, still, the business part of it is more important, right? So, in fact, it suggests that you need to understand your domain. The domain is exactly the main part of your business that you are making money out of it, right? So, in domain-driven design, like I said, we have two design tools. Strategic part, which is mostly talking about planning, how to do stuff, how to find domains, and etc. And we have tactical parts. The tactical part of domain-driven design is mostly about implementing those planning. So it goes very deep to code and how to do it, how to write functions, and etc. So today's talk focus is this, the first one. Let's go through it. Our end goal is to create this picture on the right. Like a city, you see in my slide, if you compare it as a software with multiple modules, you see that they are small, tiny modules, and there are some roads coming out, and there is a main road, and it looks very nice, right? So I want to translate this picture to software. I said that is module, and the road coming to the main road is like API. And then if you want to get access like that, this module, other module, other city want to get access to another part of that, they just go through these APIs, right? It's nice. But if you don't plan this way ahead of we start building this city, we will end up having that picture on the left, or maybe you are sitting on the right. So the whole purpose of a strategic part is decomposing your software. Decomposing to smaller part. To the part that it means to you and to your business. So we're going to have core domains, which is your main, I will say, business part of your application, company. And you will find your subdomains. And subdomains are those small pieces that you need to find them. By talking to your business, by talking to your domain owners, domain experts, product owners. So think about a context in domain-driven design. Like, let me just give you an example. E-commerce. Let's say you are doing an e-commerce right now. Okay. So now I say my core domain is e-commerce. I want to just decompose it to smaller pieces. Then I will have a subdomain called sales. I will have product catalog. I will have accounting. I will have order, support, etc. And each of these subdomains have their own entities. So in sales, you may end up having customer with the same ID as order, but in fact, sales need or it's interested in interest part of customer, and order is interested in availability of the customer. And customer has a lot of information, right? So see, each subdomains have same entity but different needs. So these subdomains are bounded. They are isolated. This is what in domain-driven design we call bounded context. So in each bounded context, there is a language which is called ubiquitous language. And that means everyone in the team, business, analyzer, whoever is working in that subdomain or is going or supposed to work for that, they talk the same language. And in domain-driven design, it says that you don't need to unique the language for the whole system. Okay, it doesn't make sense. You just need to unify the language for subdomain. So the language about customer in sales may be different from other subdomain. All right, fine. And then you may ask right now, okay, we have bounded context, we have the same language, but then now, if they are so isolated, how can I get access to others? Because maybe sales want to get access to customer subdomain or catalog, for instance. It's very important. All of the subdomains in my example, they want to get access to catalog because they want catalog. All right. This is what creates in domain-driven design context map. You see that here in this picture, you can get access to different subdomains with different ways. But that's not ideal, right? That reminds me the same picture that I showed you in the beginning. If everyone just get access to everyone, then, okay, what's the point? Here is multiple solutions in domain-driven design to solve this problem. Today, I only focus on two of them, which I think for my needs and my application, especially Flutter applications, are good enough. First of them is shared kernel. That means if you want to share something with other subdomain, you can put them into shared kernel. Let's imagine as a common package. And then everyone can maintain that subdomain, that shared kernel, and all other subdomain can get access to it. But it looks like a bit, for some cases, maybe it's good, but for some other cases, not. Because if everyone is responsible for maintaining one main part of the application, at the end of the day, guess what? Yeah, someone said, no one is responsible, right? If everyone responsible for shared kernel, then at the end of the day, no one is responsible. And then we will end up having something unmaintainable, right? Let's go to another option. The second option is creating a thin layer in each subdomain called open host service. I can translate this in our language as a developer. That is API. So each subdomain, to get access to others, they need to go through APIs. So you provide a public API, expose that, and other gets that information from API. All right. This is only a small part of the domain-driven design. It's a huge information. And don't worry right now if you're feeling you're lost. I tell you a story. It's a lot of information, for sure. You need to go after my talk, or days after that, come back to the slide, which I will share the information, and look at it, and try to remember, or watch the video again, try to implement it, or try to think your application in this way, and try to digest it. Because these are not the information you can digest right away. It will take time. But when we get to the example application, which I'm going to show you, it will make more sense to you. Just bear with me a little bit. So, what do I suggest then for architecting the Flutter application? All right, I go through it. Let's go the same example that I give you, e-commerce, right? First of all, I said that we're going to have subdomains. And in this case, we have multiple packages, let's say. I have sales, catalog, common, etc. I go to catalog part and sales part, for instance, right now. The first layer inside this subdomain, which I'm suggesting to create, is presentation layer. So the presentation layer consists of, I just give a name, Smart UI or feature, which is the main screen of your Flutter application that is working with the logic part. So you have screen and logic. And logic, in this case, can be handled by anything. The state management could be block, could be change notifier, whatever you like. So this part, it's fine. And if you do these tiny changes here, and you make it separate with a screen, you can even change this logic part from block to anything else later easily. Refactoring will be easy. And then you're going to have, of course, some widgets that are going to be shared within these subdomains only, which you can actually have them under widgets. All right, fantastic. Let me show you quickly in the application. So I have catalog here right now. Is it big enough for everyone? OK, fantastic. I have catalog here. And I have presentation layer. And my presentation layer has different screens. And I go through one of them. I have detail, catalog detail, or let's say catalog list. And then that is my main screen, which is being provided by block. And my logic, most of my logic is here. And as you see here, I'm actually I'm constructing my block with another service, which I call it facade service. That is exactly what I'm going to talk about next. So the next layer, which I'm suggesting, it's supposed to be application layer. So the application layer, it's a simplified version of all of your services you have underneath. And it will provide an API to your presentation layer. So your presentation layer only talks to application layer. And the application layer, it actually implements the facade pattern. So let's look at it. So I have my application layer right now. That is a service here, which, as you see here, it gets repository. Okay, we will get into it. That is next. And then it just provides these APIs, very simple version, to my UI. So my UI will get my logic part of it, get fetch product here from application layer. And the third layer, which I'm suggesting, is domain layer, where this layer is very special to this subdomain because that is a layer which are isolated for that particular subdomain. All the logics, entities, interfaces for this particular domain, subdomain needs to be in this layer. So in fact, this layer doesn't communicate with layer above, or other layers will get access to it, and they know now, okay, what do I need for this layer, for instance, for my entities to be provided to my presentation layer. This is exactly what domain layer telling me. Right? Let's look at it quickly. So we're going to have this domain layer. The logic part is specifically designed for this domain. It's getting a little bit complex, right? Don't worry. So this is an example. I may need to actually return, based on the product type, different manufacturer name, which is not in any API or anything. I just want to implement it here, for instance. And that is the logic that is just for this case. So I just put them here. Fine. Then I have my interfaces, which is an abstract class that tells other domain, like next layer, which I'm going to talk about, what is going to be provided to the application layer. Fine. And then I have my entities, which says which entity for this product I need. Fantastic. What is next? Then we have infrastructure layer. An infrastructure layer is a layer that has low-level access to data. It could be HTTP data, it could be cache data, it could be geolocation, or these kind of data, right? And in fact, you have these tiny services to get access to the data. Fine. You need to know, actually, when you get the data, which kind of entity you need to serialize or deserialize, or what kind of data from cache or from service to provide, from remote, provided to the layer upper, right? So these are responsibility of repositories and models. So repository are where you actually decide which type of data should be sent up. You fetch your data for remote, you may put it in the cache, and then now you have a cache data, right? And then in repository, you'll check, for instance, I need, if there is a connectivity, go to this data source. If there is no connectivity, please provide me cache data. And you can also serialize your entities in models. So let's have a look at it. This layer a little bit more carefully. So I have my data sources. Let's say this is my local. Or somebody delete. OK, now I got it. Now I have my local data sources. This is cache data. Again. OK. And then I have my remote data, which is just some HTTP calls, right? And my models, actually, they are extending the product which was in entities in domains. So now they know, actually, what we want for this subdomain. And here's the funny part. If you do it here, now you use, for instance, JSON or serialize or deserialize it. If you want to later change it to anything else, you just need to change this tiny part. Other parts, you don't need to touch anything else. So it should be very easy to change data. And then you have repository. Let's look at the repositories here. So in my repository, here is where I check the connectivity. And when I check the connectivity here, I'm suggesting that, OK, because I have connectivity, why not going to remote data and fetch the product? Or if there is no connectivity, then maybe I want to fetch from local data services. Also, I'm handling my exceptions here. So I have some rules here for these layers. So the first rule is that the presentation layer always get access to application layer, only a layer down. An application layer knows everything in domain and infrastructure. So here is where you actually inject your repository to application, right? And domain, it's just isolated. It just gives information to other domains. But if I want to talk to each other, like get some data from sales or from catalog, like sales want to get some data, how should I get it? Should I go directly to infrastructure layer of catalog? That is what I suggest not to do it. So if you want to do that, provide an API, a public API, which is not going to be changed, even though you are changing on their layers in this subdomain. Like if you are changing anything in your data sources, it should not touch any other subdomains because they are getting information from API, this tiny layer. And the API is always, or it should be, stable. If you think about it right now, I'll show you the whole project as a view right now. So if you think about it right now, so you are decomposing your application to this tiny, tiny part, and then layers, and then you're exposing APIs. And in fact, here is the time you can even think of publish them as a package, right? And let's think about it. If your company is going to create the second app, which is going to be very similar to the first one, but some changes, for instance, an admin app and a user app, and you need a lot of these subdomains to be similar in both, then here is you can simply just plug them into the next app. Keep in mind, for small application, it may not actually make sense to implement all of these layers and like complexity. But when I started this talk, I said, you just listen to me, these are the suggestions, and you just take away whatever it fits to your application. So if it makes sense to remove application layer and just do simpler version of it, just do it. It is very important, though, to think and plan what you want to do before you start and decompose your application to smaller pieces and more maintainable with the same language familiar to everyone. So here is the structure of the application. You may want to use it in your application. So under library lib folder, you see that I have catalog. Under catalog, I introduce my API. And then I have my application, domain, infrastructure, presentation, whatever we just went through together. So, let's summarize. And I'm happy actually to answer questions because I gave this talk a couple of times and I know that there will be a lot of questions. I'm happy to answer them. So, in short, we went through the basic of domain-driven design for this particular project and application. And we've seen how strategic domain-driven design with those concepts which I presented can help to architect our application better. And we also have seen a layered architecture for each subdomain to make it easier to maintain. And in fact, even to refactor them later. So with that said, you will get access to a slide with this short link. You can also follow me on Twitter if you have any question later, or if you are trying to implement and you will get some question. I'm happy to answer. And all in all, now I'm ready for your question. Just don't ask the hard one. Yes. Thank you. Yes, please. Okay, continue. I try to understand.
What do you test in your application? Do you test modules or you test?
Good question. No, well, that's a good question. It depends on, well, I have an opinion about testing. That's my personal opinion after years of development. So we usually discuss in team and decide how much coverage we need, right? And I think that the most important part of the application is those parts that we are writing logics, right? So I think in this case, in this layered architecture, to my opinion, if you want to test, you should test from very, very bottom, like infrastructure. It's very important, everything probably, and that's it. And that's what we've done. I think for us, that was enough. But we also had testing for our presentation layer, which is a different story. That was end-to-end testing somehow, like making sure that the data that is coming to the presentation layer actually construct the screen, right? So that was very important with the correct data. We also tested that. So for me, these two parts, which we did. You may want to test everything, every single function you write, every line. Feel free to do that if you have time. Of course, if Uncle Bob was here, first of all, I was killed. Secondly, he was told me that, okay, don't say this because we have to go with the TDD. And we have to write everything with that. Of course, yeah, you can do that. I respect Uncle Bob. Many of these things that I just said, it's from his clean architecture things, like the methodology that he has. But you know, different teams may come up with different opinions. And I guess it's totally fine. If it works for your team and it's serving very well to business, why not doing that? Just do that. That's my personal opinion. Okay. Okay, the tough question is coming.
Yeah. Thank you very much for the talk. Domain-driven design, apart from entities, also introduces the concept of value objects.
Yes.
So do you think they are a bit of an overkill for Flutter apps? Or if not, how would you implement them?
Yeah, I think it's an overkill.
Yeah, probably.
That's why it's not here.
I guess so.
Yes. So I think what I presented right now, and I'm trying to make my application with this strategy and this strategic planning, let's say, it worked very well for me at least, and that's why I'm sharing with you. And of course, I checked other things and tried, but sometimes you feel like, okay, you are doing too much things for a little outcome, right? And okay, maybe you should remove it. I think for that particular question, it's a little bit overkill for Flutter application. Even for this particular presentation, which I gave, it in some, again, I'm telling you, in some of your application, you may not need to go through all of them. Make it a little bit simpler if you want. But again, strategically think about it and think about these layers. If you want to remove a layers, have a plan for it. So what do you want to do instead? And that's fine, I guess.
Hi, I'm here.
Okay.
Thanks for the topic. And you mentioned the clean architecture pattern, yeah, Uncle Bob. And can you please describe some like high-level differences between clean architecture and the domain-driven pattern?
Yeah, that's a good question. Let me tell you something. The domain-driven design, like I said, has two parts, right? Strategic part, which we went through it, and it's mostly planning and make everything ready for the next step, which is implementing, and the tactical part. And in the tactical part, actually, you are going through different architecture pattern, let's say. Like clean architecture is one of them. You may have onion architecture, you may have something else, right? And your question is which one is better, or what's the difference? Right?
Not better, but a little difference, because I heard a lot of similar stuff that related to clean architecture and yours examples.
Yeah, like I said, my talk is very inspired by clean architecture, a little bit also adding from onion architecture, especially the application part. So I feel like combining these two together, for me, for that particular application, works very well.
Could you please just add some brief information about the application level? I didn't get it a little bit.
Okay,
so
yeah,
what
I
does
can
it
explain.
store?
Of course, yes. The application layer responsibility, like I said, is facade pattern. And what is facade? Facade.
Just interface. Yeah.
Yes. Facade is like to, let me very, very simply say that. Combine multiple things into one and do whatever you want, and then just get back to the presentation layer with one only method, let's say. Right? That is what I want to do here. And instead of maybe calling multiple things in my logic in presentation layer, I just want to simplify them into one in one layer first, and then in my logic, I just get access to one thing and one function to do one thing. That's the purpose of this layer.
Hello.
Hi.
It kind of reminds me of Manfred from Angular.
Reminds you, sorry, what?
Manfred.
Manfred.
Yeah, sorry. So
Okay.
he did a similar thing, like a book of it, and he has the same layers, so I'm inspired by that also.
I know Manfred very well. He's my friend. It's Angular community. I know him very well. Of course, some of the logic here, these are the things that are coming from the book, right?
Exactly.
So like, everyone can talk about it, first of all. But I don't think his logic for Angular part is similar to this part, because I have attended his talk a few times.
Injection. My question is, what is your single source of truth in this application? In our application, Angular is the router, so what's your single source of truth there?
Single source of truth for the data, you mean?
The domains and how the states transfers for the domains. What are you listening to, basically? As I say, it's the routing for us, so we have everything in route level. So what should be there for?
To be honest, I don't really understand what you mean, but do you want to talk more about it, or maybe we can talk here more about it?
Yeah, maybe later.
Yes.
Be nice.
That's
Thank
good.
you.
So maybe someone else can ask a question then.
Yes, sure.
Sorry,
in here. Okay.
Okay.
You said that the subdomains can communicate with each other through, for example, API. Do you have any technique to avoid deadlocks? Because one subdomain may ask second one about some data, second one will ask third one, and the third one will ask
Very
first
good
one,
question.
and there should be some approach to avoid
Yes.
that. Yeah.
Very good question. Let me tell you this in DDD, my experience. The most difficult part of DDD, to my opinion, is finding these subdomains in a way that they kind of work independent and they expose themselves as needed. It's very difficult to find them. I didn't present this today to say this is like very easy to do it. You will have a lot of challenge. But if you can find them, it will be easy. And why, like you said, subdomains are going to talk to each other with APIs, of course, but how can we avoid calling each other too much, right? That is the question. That is exactly coming back to the strategic part. This is like how well you can find these subdomains in a way that they don't need to be called too much. Like, for instance, in that particular case, my catalog is the only probably subdomain that need to get a lot of access to. But other subdomains, they are okay, they are just fine to be independent. So I would suggest that more planning and thinking about these subdomains before even name them or start creating them. I hope I answered, but if I didn't, I'm happy to show some of the cases that we've went through, and you see here probably, or there, I'll be there. One more question.
Here.
Okay.
How do you provide connection between each layer? So, between each layer, do you provide abstract class?
Between each layer, I just construct them into another layer. Yeah, I provide them with abstract.
Between each layer.
Let's say between each layer, you get access from presentation to application, right? That's where your application, like let's say your application service.facade, will be constructed into your logic in presentation layer. That's the only way you get access, and that's it.
Okay.
You provide them like that.
Thanks.
Yeah, you can see actually in the sample code, you'll see I will update this repository. I'm trying to update it like every day, adding some more things to it. So keep an eye on the repository. I will add more module to it. I will add more logic to it and better documentation probably. And you will know more with a real example. I'm not just going to present something without an example. Example is very, very important. So I will add them to this repository for sure. And I think there was one more question here. Fine, good. Yes.
Hello. According
Hi.
to overkills, do you recommend anemic entities over the rich? Because concept of DDD declares a rich entity as a set of behaviors, not data sets.
Yeah, you're right. I can answer it in this way. Okay. Because you said recommend. I am not a DDD expert, right? I said that the things that I'm telling is inspired by DDD. So, and I thought, and I think still that the thing that I said, it's the most simple version of DDDs that I like to implement in my application. So the other part that I didn't say, I don't prefer them, let's say.
Okay.
Yes. All right. I'm done like 15 minutes ago. So this shows actually time's up, but I'm happy to answer any question. I know that the topic is a little bit complex. I will stand either here or there, so just come to me and ask any question. Thank you very much for attending.